Hey, Doug Boynton here. You're tuned in to WHRO's Weekly Edition, your one-stop shop for the stuff that went down around here this week. News, stories, you know the drill. Let's dive in. In this week's program, there may be no free lunch, but if you're a Norfolk student or know one, then you know they walked away with a free book at the start of the year. It's part of an initiative to improve literacy. How to keep elections running smoothly. We're back with another installment of the Democracy at Work series, and we'll take a look at what's needed to keep the election machine churning year after year.
The fact that we have 100 plus people willing to do it just in York County, let alone across the country, when I think about it, it's pretty impressive that they sign up to do this over and over again.
It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. All right, so it's not just names you'll see on Virginia's ballots this election season. There is at least one extra question in there. There's no right or wrong answer. Our own Michelle Hankerson's got the scoop on what these ballot questions are all about.
Chesapeake voters have a special question at the end of their ballots about curbside recycling. City leaders decided over the summer to ask voters what they wanted to do about the discontinued city service. City Manager Chris Price described how Chesapeake will use the results.
The thing the referendum would trigger would be conversations with council about here were the results of the referendum, and here's how to move forward.
All voters in Virginia will decide on a constitutional amendment about expanding a tax exemption to spouses of deceased military service members. Currently, Virginia allows a property tax exemption for the spouses of military members who were killed in action. The proposed amendment this year would change the state constitution to extend that exemption to spouses of military members who died while on active duty. Northern Virginia Delegate Kathy Tran carried the legislation needed to turn it into a constitutional amendment. On her website, she says the change makes military benefits more equitable. Tran's description says the amendment would cover the families of service members who die in training or operational accidents. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
To find out more about the ballot questions and other voting information, including candidate questionnaires, visit whro.org/voterguide2024. You think elections in Virginia can get crazy? Well, it looks like almost the entire staff for North Carolina's Republican candidate for governor called it quits Sunday. WUNC's Colin Campbell says it all went down just days after a CNN report dropped, highlighting some pretty ugly racist and sexual comments posted on a pornography forum.
Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson has denied that he's behind online comments that include a call for slavery to be reinstated. WUNC has not independently confirmed CNN's report. All but 3 members of Robinson's campaign team have now resigned, leaving only 2 spokesmen and a bodyguard. The resignations include his campaign manager and longtime advisor. Robinson issued a news release Sunday thanking his former staffers and promising to announce new hires within days. The deadline has now passed for Robinson to drop out. And while he's pledging to stay in the race until November, some Republicans say his embattled campaign could harm former President Donald Trump's hopes of winning a key swing state. I'm Colin Campbell.
Speaking of elections, as part of the Democracy at Work series with the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO, our man Ryan Murphy sat down with York County voter registrar Walt Latham to get the scoop on what it takes to keep elections humming along year after year.
Yeah, this is the different ballot styles. So you see, it doesn't say anything there, federal only, presidential only, and you just have president there. On the federal only, you've got president, Senate, House, and then on the full ballot, you've got president, Senate, House, and the constitutional amendment. My name is Walt Latham. I'm the York County voter registrar.
The registrar ends up doing, overseeing voter registration, working on that kind of stuff, and then also getting ready for the next election or wrapping up from the last one.
I'd actually been an officer of election when I was 17 years old, and so I've been working in the field, I guess you could say, since I guess that was June of 1995. And I've worked as an officer of election, I've been an assistant registrar, and now I've been registrar. And so I've seen the people who work in the field, and a lot of them, the vast majority of them are not in it for the money. I mean, sure, the $100 or $200 helps around Christmas time. But all these people signed up for this, and they're there for a long day, and they can make mistakes, and people depend on them to do things the right way. And so the fact that we have 100 plus people willing to do it just in York County, let alone across the country, when I think about it, it's pretty impressive that they sign up to do this over and over again.
You know, the stereotype of registrars was it was the little old lady who was, you know, someone's wife, and maybe she needed a job, but she just kept the books or something like that, and people would go to her house to register. Back before the civil rights era, and you can imagine, just based on my understanding of things, if you were a black citizen going to register to vote at a little old white lady's house, the racial politics of that. So it's just so much different than how it used to be. To me, I don't think we had a democratic system until the 1960s, but I think you could say that's a blot on America, which it is, but it's also just looking over the span of history and seeing the improvements. It makes me very proud to be an American, and the system's not perfect, and I don't know that any system is perfect, but it hopefully becomes more perfect as it goes along. And it's hard to say what is a perfect version of democracy. So it's really kind of a hard thing to define what democracy is, other than it may be like that Supreme Court justice said about pornography, you know it when you see it. You have people who are wondering about it and wondering if they can trust the system, and I think that they come into it, a lot of people come into it with the assumption that elections are very straightforward and simple, and they aren't. They are, but they aren't. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into just solving like just a simple thing. And even when it's something you know it could be fixed simply, sometimes there are rules about how you have to fix it. And so you can't just say, well, we'll just wing it here. You got to do our special dance. We got to do this and that. Got to, have a meeting for this or whatever. I knew that this job, it's kind of like being the king or the queen or Santa Claus. Again, no one's perfect, but your job is to try to be part of the situation, but above it. So you watch the queen, you watch the king is new, but you watch them and they're involved. They help choose a prime minister, but they're not really part of the process. Santa Claus is Santa Claus. Who does Santa Claus vote for? Well, no one really talks about that because Santa Claus is for, everyone. So it is a job beyond just being one person. It's a trust. Public office is a public trust. And so I've always kind of known that. I mean, there are things that bring it back into focus, but I've always known that this job I'm the registrar wherever I go, and this job is something that people depend on, and it's an important job. And I don't have to cure cancer. I don't have to do anything else. I feel like I have accomplished something if this is all that I do for the rest of my life.
Energy bigwigs and economic development folks gathered in Williamsburg recently to hash out how power generation is going to shape the future economy of Hampton Roads. WHRO's Ryan Murphy was there too.
Energy demand has exploded in Virginia, in part thanks to power-hungry data facilities that have popped up to handle artificial intelligence computing. Those demands threaten to bottleneck the power supply and in turn could make businesses think twice about coming here. But beyond the challenges, development professionals like Doug Smith with the Hampton Roads Alliance see opportunities.
We are remilitarizing, reindustrializing, and decarbonizing all at once with very little direction and a ton of money flowing, right? A ton of federal money and a ton of private money flowing. And so what that means for Hampton Roads is, candidly, this is our moment.
Smith says the region can seize on its industrial workforce to lead the charge on some next-generation energy projects, things like the nascent wind power industry and potential new nuclear power development. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Anchors away, the aircraft carrier USS Truman, her escorts and air wing, and roughly 6,500 sailors left Hampton Roads this week for a deployment that is expected to include the Red Sea and likely harm's way. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh was there.
Seaman Mason Baker of North Carolina is on his first deployment. His mother says she's watching the news and she's worried about what might happen in the Middle East.
I'm beyond proud. I just can't describe how proud I am of him. It's an amazing thing what he's doing. It's scary, but it's an awesome thing what he's doing.
USS Truman last deployed to Europe after the start of the war in Ukraine in 2022 and then spent a year undergoing maintenance in Norfolk. The Navy has had a constant presence in the Red Sea in eastern Mediterranean since war broke out in Gaza. The Norfolk-based USS Eisenhower had the most active deployment since World War II, countering Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Suffolk approved new zoning rules for historic neighborhoods, or as they are called in the city, villages. WHRO's Nick McNamara reports the story.
Morgan Butler with the Southern Environmental Law Center commended the new rules, but says more can be done for residents of villages like Oakland that are hit hard by flooding.
These changes won't fix the flooding, but hopefully they'll help keep new development from making the flooding worse.
The rules introduce new dimension standards and limit impervious surfaces for residences in historic neighborhoods. They do not apply to commercial developments. Butler hopes Suffolk will take a closer look at elevated mound septic systems in the future, noting such setups can push stormwater runoff onto adjacent properties. City officials say in the long term, they plan to update the dated village plans after the adoption of the comprehensive plan. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Women who fought alongside special operators in Afghanistan are now fighting for recognition 3 years after the U.S. left that country. They appeared at an event at William and Mary on Wednesday. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh has more.
Veteran Rebecca Edmondson worked with Army Rangers in Afghanistan before women were allowed in special operations.
In the beginning, the guys definitely did not want women, and so there was a lot of distrust in the beginning.
Culturally, male troops were not able to talk to Afghan women during raids. Over time, female soldiers were accepted. Manaz Akbari, a former Afghan commander with the female tactical platoon, says they're now relying on their former colleagues.
I think still there are a lot of people, especially veterans, that are trying to help Afghans.
3 years after the war, Afghans like Akbari are still trying to reach a permanent immigration status. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Today is the last call for our fall membership drive at WHRO. It's your shot to back the award-winning journalism, unique music programs, and learning tools you love. Our local news thrives on your support, so swing by whro.org/donate to pledge your support. And thank you, as always, for sticking with us. But first, 15,000 Norfolk Public School students walked home with a free book as the school year started. A district-wide effort to improve and encourage literacy. WHRO's Barry Graham has the details.
The giveaway isn't just a grab a book and go event. It's a coordinated literacy effort with All District Reads, an organization dedicated to providing a shared reading experience within homes to promote literacy and create a passion for reading. Gary Anderson is the founder of the program. He says it's a community-wide effort to get these books into the hands of kids.
All District Reads is the third nonprofit that I have been the primary one to develop. All the nonprofits deal with children enjoying books read aloud to them in the home. But this one, All District Reads, came about basically during COVID, and we wanted to partner with school systems to develop these family literacy programs and involve the community. We have community ownership at the grassroots level for our program, involving 15,000 elementary students in Norfolk twice a year.
Anderson worked in public education for over 3 decades and saw firsthand the impact of literacy skills and school achievement. He says just throwing books at students doesn't work. There has to be a tie-in with at-home reading and storytelling.
They struggled in reading, but that was just a symptom of a problem. The real problem was home-based and lack of language and literacy. You had to develop a story, and every time when it's read aloud or listened to in audio form, everyone shares their own story. Parents tell their own story. Older siblings tell their own stories. And so it ends up being such a rich environment to develop the language skills and engagement skills needed to be successful in school. If you don't have those language skills and you don't have the ability to ask good questions and engage your material, you're sitting in the back of the class and you're not involved. And that's what I saw as a teacher.
Reading scores across all demographics have declined steadily since 2019. Some observers say the pandemic wiped out 20 years of reading score gains as schools shuttered and students transitioned to virtual learning. And the repercussions of literacy loss applies across the board to other subjects. Anderson says literacy skills are essential in creating a foundation for good learning.
It's tantamount of importance during the primary year that they have a foundation in language and understanding and vocabulary and engagement. This is so much of what will carry them through the grades.
The book provided to the students is School Days, according to Humphrey. Anderson says it's all about a hamster that solves problems.
These series just captivates children. They're all about Humphrey, who's in the classroom. Humphrey is a very proactive problem solver. And so the students get to find out about other students in the classroom, like Shout Out Mary. And they were wondering why shout out. She just shouts out the answer in class. And Humphrey is just so proactive and a great model for everyone. It's great. Children love the books. They love the books. They cherish the books. They sleep with the books. They take them home and really get into the series.
The program is funded by local businesses, grants, and private individuals. School districts might use Title I funding. Local community organizations like the Rotary Club also help by labeling books, doing recorded readings, and helping to disseminate the books to the students. Frederick Douglass is quoted as saying, "Once you learn to read, you will be forever free." For WHRO News, I'm Barry Graham.
We should mention that WHRO CEO Bert Schmidt is a member of the Board of Directors for All District Reads, and Norfolk City Public Schools are stakeholders in Horetta, which holds the license for the WHRO stations. More Outer Banks beach homes collapsed into the Atlantic this week, making a total of at least 3 in the past 7 days. WHRO's Catherine Hafner has more on the first house to go into the drink.
This house is the third to collapse in Rodanthe this year and the 8th since 2020. No one was living inside or injured. The National Park Service says the property owner, who lives in Hampton, hired a contractor to immediately start cleaning up the mess. Officials urge people to avoid the beach near the north end of Rodanthe and for several miles south because of dangerous debris. Local officials say many more homes are at risk of collapse because of their exposure to storms and rising sea levels. The Park Service last year bought and demolished 2 homes in Rodanthe and hopes to expand the program. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
A gold medal, and now the key to the city. Chesapeake welcomed hometown fella, Olympic gold medalist Grant Holloway home last week. WHRO's Ryan Murphy was there.
Hundreds turned out to welcome Chesapeake's homegrown track star back to the city where he learned more than how to run.
From my beautiful mother, Miss Tasha, to Coach Stan, that everybody knows in the community as well. They have raised me not only to be excellent on the track, but more so off the track.
Holloway says addressing the hometown crowd made his heart rate spike more than when he stepped out onto the track in Paris this summer to win his first Olympic gold. Holloway ran and played football at Grassfield High School. He went on to become a 3-time world champion in the 110-meter hurdle and earned a silver medal in the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
For many years, young people flocked to big cities, but now thanks to remote work, Virginia Public Radio's Michael Pope reports that younger people are saying, not so much.
Small towns are the new hip thing with young people who have traditionally flocked to urban areas. Hamilton Lombard at UVA's Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service says ever since the pandemic, young adults are often bypassing the big city.
I think that's certainly the story when you look at a place like Arlington, which has really been a mecca for young adults coming out of college the last couple of decades, and it's seen one of the largest drops in the country in its 25 to 44 population, in part because fewer are coming in and I think more are going out since the pandemic.
He says now that many people don't need to be at an office every day, demographic patterns are shifting away from places like Arlington toward places like Winchester or Fredericksburg.
What it's allowed is a lot of people who accept high-paying salaries in Northern Virginia to be able to take those and live somewhere more affordable, whether it's Winchester, maybe up towards Pennsylvania.
The last time demographic patterns changed this much, he says, was when jobs moved from the manufacturing sector to service-based jobs. So it's a trend that's likely to continue unless remote work becomes less popular. I'm Michael Pope.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
The top guy at the Veterans Administration says the Hampton VA hospital, long troubled, is on the right track now after a leadership shakeup in July. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh reports the secretary met with the interim director and some other temporary leaders this week.
VA Secretary Dennis McDonough says the National VA changed leadership in July because of a damning series of Inspector General's reports which outlined problems with patient care and administration at the Hampton VA. McDonough also says the VA was slow to listen to concerns from local staff.
What I realize here at Hampton is we had to do a better job also of listening to our care teams here on the ground. Right? We've corrected that.
McDonough says the underlying problem he is hearing from the staff is the culture at Hampton. The National VA has not determined whether the interim team will remain at Hampton long term. McDonough was at the hospital to address VA Suicide Awareness Month. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Things got a little testy last week when Norfolk officials and the Army Corps of Engineers sat down with the Freemason Street Area Association. Locals are not thrilled about the city's planned flood wall. They're worried it will mess up their waterfront views and sink property values. WHRO's Catherine Hafner was there.
Residents of Freemason say they're blindsided by Norfolk's plans to build a flood wall. It would wrap around the historic neighborhood to protect the area from major storms. Neighborhood Association President Jack Kavanaugh says something needs to be done to protect against flooding. But
I was sitting there in my front room reading this afternoon, looking out to where one of the proposed walls goes. I said, my God, do I want to see a 16-foot wall out of there for the rest of my life?
the section of flood wall that would run through Freemason hasn't yet been designed and won't start construction until at least 2027. In the meantime, the city plans to gather resident feedback. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Fort Monroe said goodbye to its longtime leader recently. WHRO's Nick McNamara reported the story.
For its entire 14-year existence, Glenn Oder has been at the helm of the Fort Monroe Authority. Now, the organization's CEO is calling it a career. His retirement is effective October 1st. The Board of Trustees for the Authority on Thursday appointed John Hutchison as interim chief executive officer following Oder's departure. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Ryan Murphy, Catherine Hafner, Michelle Hankerson, Steve Walsh, Barry Graham, and Nick McNamara. Virginia Public Radio's Michael Pope and WUNC's Colin Campbell. Also, thanks as always to Connor Worley, who produced today's broadcast. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed, and you can get your news updates at WHRO.org, the WHRO smartphone app, and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.